Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are watching from around the world. Welcome to this webinar. We're very excited. And as we get started, there are some folks still signing on. We want to find out who you are. So let's get started with a poll, shall we? Let's pop open this poll. Please start filling it in. All those of you that are on time, congratulations. Thank you for being here on time. Please start filling in the poll. And as you're filling this in, if you are our guests, who are Mandarin speakers, you can go on the lower right of your Zoom boxes and click interpretation, and you can switch to a Chinese version so that you might understand this better. So,
but don't forget to mute it so that you'll hear the Mandarin.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome tip. So yes, thank you for filling in the poll as we're going. We're seeing who you are. Wow, it's great to see that many of the folks on this Zoom platform at least are most people have, well, it's like tied right now between 2 to 3 and 1. Oh, no, sorry, 2 to 3 is more. It's now at 62, fluctuating there. This almost feels like the economy and how things are fluctuating so much right now, but this is awesome to watch. And as far as the children's ages, thank you for filling that in.
Between 6 and 12 years old.
Majority are between 6 to 12. And as far as the topic on resilience is concerned, thank you for posting your answers here, and you can be assured that your polls are anonymous. Don't worry. So your comments here, we're seeing most people, 57% are saying, you know why I like this topic? It's because of all the stuff that I'm seeing on this poll question. It is increasing the challenges, or the increasing challenges in raising our kids in the last couple of years, fatigue and feeling of discouragement during the season of parenting. Welcome to the club. It is challenging in this pandemic, and people wanting to learn more relevant tips. But it seems that, yeah, that of the three, the most dominant at 47% is those who want to learn relevant tips to be prepared for challenging times. This is very exciting. So again, if you are just signing on right now, you're seeing a poll on your screens. Please fill in the poll so that we might get to know you. And for those that have just started to log on or catch this on Facebook or whichever of the platforms, welcome to this global webinar. It seems that you have told us that many of you are married. We got that in the registration forms. Most are married, and of the married folks, you have 63% with 2 to 3 kids. Some have 4 and more, which includes us. We have 6 kids for those that have not heard our past moderation of webinars. And then for the ages of the kids, most have children that are 6 to 12, 43%, and then a number that are young, 25%. So fairly young, honey. This would be very exciting.
I think it's good because I think you always want a kind of a preventive approach to parenting. Right. And so the younger you start doing things right, the better.
That's right. An ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. So thank you for filling this in. It looks like the polls are tapering off. So I'm going to close this right now and get us started with some conversations. Babe, when we were asked to speak about resilience, or actually asked to moderate this panel on resilience, what came to your mind when we hear the word resilience?
Well, first, I think we have lots to improve on as parents ourselves. We have 6 kids, and I feel like with our older kids, we pushed them a little more, then we got kind of soft with the girls.
So we got soft.
So they tend to be a little more fragile. But remember our oldest son, when he was in the swimming competition, varsity swimming competition, and he made a mistake on one of the races because he jumped in with a shirt on.
Sorry, it wasn't just a mistake. It was a major lapse.
It was major.
So what happened?
He jumps in with a shirt on and his goggles popped off and he started doing the wrong stroke.
Yes, it was a 50-meter butterfly event, and he started doing the freestyle.
So he didn't realize till he was halfway through the lane, and then he got so embarrassed. And do you remember that after that race, because he still had a couple more to do, he wanted to quit. And
he jumped out of the pool. He realized what happened, and he started slapping the water. He was so frustrated, right?
And I didn't know what to say too. Yeah. And I wasn't sure if I should cheer so that people wouldn't realize that he was our son.
But what is critical is before that whole day, it was his very first varsity event. Yeah. So I looked him in the eyes and I said, son, remember, whatever happens, finish the race. I just felt like I had to say that as a dad. So he said, okay, dad. And so here he is in that moment. And then
yes. And so after that, he wanted to quit, and you lovingly pulled him aside and said, son, you actually have two choices. You can walk away from this, and that's going to leave an imprint on your life. This is a pivotal moment. Or you can stay and just finish and do your best for the rest of it. And he decided to stay. And do you remember at the end of the day, when he had done well in the other races, he said, this was the best day of my life.
He goes, and I was shocked. He sits back like this and he goes, this is the best day of my life. And we're like, whoa, what happened, right?
Exactly.
And what did he say?
And we said, why? And he said, because I learned how to persevere and I learned how to keep going. And so I'm so excited to hear from our panel of experts, because I think that we have a lot to improve on in terms of still teaching our kids to be resilient, to keep hoping, to keep, rising up to the challenges of their times. And so, yeah, I'm excited to.
I am excited also to unpack this. It is true for our family, true for us. I mean, even the way that these webinars have unfolded, a lot of resilience from the team and the people behind the scenes. So thank you again for everybody that is behind the scenes, but more so to our guests and participants all over the world. If you're in a chat box, tell us where you're watching from. It'll be great to see where you guys are watching from as well, whichever platform you have available. And as we formally get started, here we go. Let's start talking about what it is we're going to cover today, right? As a practical reminder for everybody, we will be videoing the whole webinar that you guys are watching right now. And as we do this for you all, you will receive a link to the webinar, and you'll also receive the speaker's notes. So you can take screenshots, take photos on your phone. For the younger folks, you can use that in social media, but don't worry, you will get copies of the notes as well as we go. So if you do have any questions, since this webinar is about you, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, whichever platform you have. And if you saw the chat earlier on Zoom, those that might want it in another language, there are folks also on our chat box that can respond to you in Mandarin specifically, right? So thank you again for joining us. Once again, if you've just joined us, another reminder, you can catch this webinar in Mandarin by going on the lower right and clicking interpretation if you're on Zoom. And then you have the option to hear it in Chinese, and you need to put yourself on mute. Yes. To make sure you hear the Mandarin translation, those that might want to watch that. Right, so let's get started, baby.
Yeah, so we just want to introduce to you what Family First Global is, so you have an idea. If you don't yet, is the host for today's amazing webinar, and FFG really exists to strengthen fathers and mothers, marriages and families around the world. This global webinar, we partner with like-minded organizations to men and women become better spouses and parents in the context of traditional marriage and family. So the Family First Global National Chapters from the Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore, Pakistan, Japan, and Myanmar are also proud co-hosts of today's event. So this is important because if you're zooming in from any of these member nations, please do not hesitate to contact them so they can help you build a stronger family.
That's great. And I want to just emphasize that. It's so important that you get connected so that you might help grow in the space of building families that are resilient. And we can't journey alone. So the whole series we've been going through is called Family Health 360. And this webinar is the third part in a series. To give you a brief review of what happened, first one was back in January, called Navigating Your Family Through the Pandemic. And the second part was back in March. Maybe some of you caught that. It was entitled Preparing Your Family for Economic Challenges. Now, the bad news is if you missed it, you missed it. But the good news is, hey, you can actually watch those webinars by following Family First Global's platform. You can go on its Facebook page and catch those past webinars. And we love them. So it might be very helpful for you if you want to go back. In the meantime, since you're on this part 3, what are we going to cover here? Many families have felt overwhelmed as the world has become increasingly volatile, right, babe?
Yeah, I just think of the Texas shooting the other day, which is so traumatic.
In the US, there's so many things, across countries, there's so much stress that's happening. So all of these changes, restrictions, shocking things, people being uprooted from our lives and different routines have left many of us feeling vulnerable and weak. So that's why the organizers of this event have decided, why not talk about that? So today, we're pleased to invite education and parenting experts who will offer proven and practical ways to grow resilient, that's the word, resilient, as families in and through these troubled times. Now, to introduce our guests, we have the founder and chairman of the organization that is behind this whole webinar series. He is the founder and chairman of Fellowship of the Fathers and Family First Global. He's the global best-selling author of Be a Better Dad Today.
We read that.
That's right. A teacher of leadership courses at some of the finest business schools in the world. And one of his daughter just graduated from one of these fine business schools called Harvard. And on a personal note, I consider him a mentor who I deeply look up to. Ladies and gentlemen, let's please welcome Professor Gregory Slayton.
Well, thank you so much, Edric. Thank you so much, Joy. And I just want to thank and welcome everyone on this call. We know that Saturday morning in Asia, Friday evening in North America, there are many other things you could be doing. But the fact that you've tuned in tells us and tells your family that your family is important. And growing a resilient, strong family is important. As our wonderful moderator said, there's nothing more important these days than helping our children, our marriages, and our families to be resilient. You know, the truth is that every family goes through difficult times. I want to repeat that, especially for those who are maybe young, maybe just got married. Every family goes through difficult times. The question is, are you going to make it through those difficult times? Are you going to grow and become stronger, or are difficulties going to break you? And as we see with the sad, desperately sad epidemic of suicide, not just in this country, not just in the United States, but all around the world, teen and young adult suicides are growing exponentially. And in fact, in some states, for people between the ages of 15 and 25, suicide is the #1 cause of death. Well, that's why we've convened this global webinar. This is our third in a series of 6 Family Health 360 global webinars that we will host. Today, we're going to really focus on moms and motherhood, which is, of course, critical to the equation. But I'm excited because in July, we're going to be focusing on fathers and their role in how to help their family and help their children to become strong and resilient. Now, we've got some experts, some world-class experts, and I myself, I'm taking notes. I'm excited to see this. And let me just tell you why. I'm just going to be honest with you. Our daughter yesterday graduated from Harvard Business School and, wait for it, Harvard Law School. It's on the same day, 4 years. That's a wonderful accomplishment, and many people on our Zoominar have been praying for my kids and our kids for a long time. But what I want to point out is this: each one of our children, and I don't want to go into detail, but I'll tell you the honest truth, each one of our children has been through very difficult times, very difficult. And I just want you to know, my friends, that it's up to us as the parents, it's up to us as the mom and the dad to help our kids get through those times and get on to better times. Now, what is resilience? A lot of people might be thinking, well, what does that really mean? And we're going to use a very simple definition here. We're going to use a very simple definition. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from difficulties, disappointments, and defeats. Whether you call it emotional resilience or emotional strength or mental fortitude, those are all good words. But the point is, we all suffer difficulties, disappointments, and defeats, all of us. This is the world we live in. But how do we learn to bounce back? As Edric and Joy were telling that great story about their son in the swimming match, right? And all of us who've been parents can identify with those times. How do we teach our children? How do we help them to develop resilience? That's exactly what our world-class speakers are going to be talking to us about tonight. And by the way, speaking of the world-class speakers, and they are tremendous, I want to introduce right now Dr. Sandra Tsang, who is an associate professor from the University of Hong Kong. Dr. Sandra is truly a world-class expert, as is our other speaker. And that's proven by the fact that the government of Hong Kong asked her to design an early educational curriculum to help parents and teachers work together to build greater reliance, greater emotional resilience in children, specifically self-confidence, problem-solving abilities, and emotional resilience. Dr. Sandra will be sharing bite-sized nuggets of wisdom that you can apply immediately in your family to be more effective parents and to help your children to develop greater resilience. You know, resilience is like a muscle. You got to use it. If you don't use it, then when you really need it, you don't have it. So it's something that we parents can help develop in ourselves and in our children. We're going to have a Q&A for Dr. Sandra in a little while, but I'm very excited to hear from her. Dr. Sandra, thank you so much for joining us, and let me turn it over to you.
Thank you very much for having this privilege to meet all of you. And I hope by sharing that comes along will be of use to all. So we are here to put our heads together to consider the very important topic. It looks like the world is fragile. A lot of things are being harmed. A lot of values, behaviors do not seem to meet our expectations, and trusted relationships are sometimes also fractured. So how can we help raise a generation who can stand all these shattering and become resilient? Okay. My sharing today will be just some of my ideas, and I hope this can be a useful stimulation for us to consider further on the topic. Okay, first of all, I would like to send my warm greetings from Hong Kong and the University of Hong Kong. We have been working there for over 30 years. Maybe we can begin with considering what are some of the possible threats to resilience to the younger generation. Okay, so here you see some of the risk factors in development. I think the first one, do you see my pointer pointing at the top left-hand corner? I'm pointing at the education pressure. So this figure seems to show us while they are just wearing their diapers, they are looking forward towards good universities, good degrees, and this and that. Okay, when they further grow up, they seem to make friends, but friends are not always helpful. Sometimes we hear a lot about peer bullying, and they can cause serious, immediate, and also lifelong consequences. And we also hear of family problems. Parents might not be behaving all the time. We hear about addiction, but it does not belong only to the younger generation. Parents can get addicted. For example, this drawing is by a young girl, 12 years old, and she is affected by family gambling problems, and money flies away, thunderstorm attacks the family, and the worst thing is, do you see this SHH here? She say it is a family secret. Shh, don't talk about it. You are not supposed to disclose our family dark side to seek help. So it makes it even more challenging. And aside from environmental pollution, we are also sometimes affected by poverty. Okay, so I guess you see here, I have a circled picture here where it is a very sarcastic picture showing somebody helping to shushai another family, but then you can see the rich-poor contrast. And above is a section of some of the divided flats in Hong Kong, the petitions. But I would say the major threat to family resilience would be family breakdown. So this picture shows before marriage, it looks like the couple are smiling. But very often after marriage, they face a lot of challenges, and they pull long faces. And until one day they find it is hard to sustain the marriage, and then they divorce. But this will cause a lot to the individual and also to the children as well. And what are some of the consequences when these developmental trajectories are being affected, it can cause a lot to the children. For example, these are some of the drawings by a girl who is affected. And you can see how you don't expect drawings like this made by a young girl at this age. Do you see any happiness, any hope, particularly on this right-hand side? Life looks like a maze. You can clearly see this is a maze, and this is what is in front of her. And then, of course, sometimes we also see children harming themselves in different ways. The above would be what we call the hair pulling disorder, when they cannot stop pulling the hair until, well, it is really not pleasant to be in the look. And then sometimes people hide by harming themselves and cutting some parts of the body. When they're older, there is also a very predominant phenomenon growing in some Asian countries, and which we call the hikikomori phenomenon. People stay at home for years without going out. And then they say they are not consuming a lot of the family resources because they're just taking up a bedroom, and then they only use the Wi-Fi. They are online learning, and then they do not come out to eat. They will just get some instant noodles and some hot water, and that is how they manage. So, but they do so for years. And of course, hygiene and mental health, etc., are at stake. And of course, just a few days ago, the whole world is shocked by this very sad incident when there was the shooting case, and close to 20 people were killed. Okay, so it costs a lot to a lot of families if they cannot stand with the resilience. And recently in Hong Kong, we have released a report on child fatality for over 3-year period. It's not a long period, but then over the 3 years, at that time, we were talking about 1 million children under the age of 18. But every year, there were already 200 children who died. And this report, which covered over 3 years, talked about 259 cases, which completed the corona investigations. And in these 3 years, we already have 5 children died of parent or caregiver assault or abuse, sometimes multiple and lasting for years. Or you say, well, young children lasting for years. Yes, most of their lives were suffering. Okay, and 59 children under 18 committed suicide. Okay, this is not a great figure. And then there were further information on why they committed suicide. And the top was study problems, and then family relationship problems, mental health problems, worrying about the future, and sometimes it is relationship problem. Also, just last week, we have 2 young girls, one in Form 1, one in Form 4. They thought they had a lesbian relationship, and they jumped together to their deaths, okay, in Hong Kong. And then another proportion was peer relationship problems. So I post these not to say, well, these are some of the sad things about Hong Kong. I hope it can ring an alarm to people or places around the world that we have to pay attention to all these possible factors. Then what do we see as resilience in the young generation? What is in your mind as parents? What do you expect your children to be? Now, for example, we have these very challenging walkovers, glass walkover over cliffs. So are these not fearing of heights, some of the elements of resilience? Or sports, they can challenge energy, speed, and skills. Is this resilience? How about here? Tolerance for innovation. I can be very creative and I don't mind pain. Is this resilience? Or, well, I have some energy and I can try to volunteer and help others. Would that be another possibility? And how about the other, I guess some of you might find this figure familiar because we have Malala here, and then is speaking up for your ideas, resilience. We have no clear answer. But here, I also know of a friend in Hong Kong whom I find very resilient. She was became a VIP, visually impaired person since 8. But she has been very resilient now that she's in her 30s. And she's now a psychotherapist, a hypnotherapist, and also serving a lot on NGO boards, helping people like her. So, and she also runs a bakery, and then she's always smiling, always positive, and always helpful, and not minding sharing her experiences and her struggles with others. Now, having talked about all these possibilities and widening your ideas on, well, what exactly could resilience be? Maybe we can go back to what some scholars teach us. For example, Michelle Boba has been famous in the area in talking about some traits of people who seem to be thriving well. And we are learning from her about the 7 characteristics. So can we build that self-confidence, empathy, self-control, integrity, curiosity, perseverance, and optimism? Could we find these elements? And if people have some or all of these elements, would they sound like they are resilient? And how can we do so? Okay, so Boba also provided us some channels as to how we can build these characteristics. And she talks first about security, giving them a strong sense of security, making them feel they are unique and they have some strengths, and making them feel connected, affiliated, showing or leading them or helping them to identify some missions, some directions, and also building up their competence. Okay, so I included her name here, and then I included these 2 slides here. So in case you are interested and want to learn more, I think this slide is very important because this gives you a lot of the practical what to do's aside from the 5 directions that you can consider. Okay, and this also is supported by strong evidence by a very famous Nobel Prize winner in economics. He has visited Hong Kong a few times, and then he is a strong drive behind our recognition of the importance to support young families. I echo what Joy was saying at the beginning of this session, that we take a preventive approach to parent education, and we hope that young parents can begin right. Okay, if they know the proper ways to build security, to build affiliation, to encourage children, that will help to reduce individual, family, and social costs. And it is the best investment for any society. So how can we do so? And then I was working on the word family. We are on the family first platform. So can we consider further on the word family? Parents should not just protect and provide. We should be providing a lot of the soft stuff and helping children to learn that we are starting from father and mother infinitely loves you, to eventually they can also say, father and mother, I love you. Okay, well, that will be a very secure attachment. And how do we do this? So originally it should be our big hands holding their small hands. And then eventually, if they can talk, we shall talk more. Shall we talk more? Of course. And then if they talk, what should you do? Listen attentively, be responsive. And if you committed to some of the things to do with them, be responsible, honor your promises. Okay, and then give them value so that they can anchor when they are drifted around by the floating values around them from their peers and from even other grown-ups or even leaders in that country or around the world, sometimes you find the leaders are not very trustful. So where do we anchor our values? So it would be the parents, okay? And also be that relayer, because if they want to challenge new horizons, will you be there to back them up? Okay, so I hope these visual images will give you some idea how you bring them from parents giving to children appreciating and banking on these assets. So further, my ideas on how to build resilience, secure attachment is very important. And the attachment should be building from happy companionship and encouraging them to freely explore while in a safe environment. Okay, so Nick is a very famous figure, which I guess you know. But here, this is a photo I take from a kindergarten in Finland. And then you see the child, very young, they were exposed to a lot of apparently freely lying materials in the school ground. But then actually the teachers and the other adults are watching while they're exploring. So these ropes like this actually help them to learn how to pull up socks and wear shoes, okay? But then in some cultures, maybe they find, well, we should not allow young children to play around with these ropes, it's dangerous. But if you are monitoring them and allowing them to freely explore, they can gain a lot of confidence by learning, trial and error, and then succeeding. The success, the satisfaction can make them move further on. And while we are around and while we are our bigger family, our older generations are around, one way to build resilience and to get attached will be to engage with a bigger family and then learn about how to relate with people of different ages, because we adopt a lifespan perspective, and it is important to be able to engage with people not at your age. That will stretch your understanding and your empathy. Okay, so this is one occasion when my whole big family went out for outing, and we were very happy because now some of them passed away, but this happy memory together still remains with us. And then if you have friends, neighbors, colleagues, and even church mates or whatnot, having fun together and working together in collaboration and going through all the challenges in discussing, negotiation, give and take, these are all important experiences. And then, of course, we have to find how to deal with the real problem. So in this picture, you will find, Sandra, you have mistyped some of the things, and then we see a big mess, and then how are you going to manage all the spelling problems here? No, this is not my focus. I know all of us are very quick in shooting at problems, spotting mistakes, but I hope you can pay attention to the green background, which are actually all the resources, all the strengths that we have. So in every children, we hope you can find the right thing. And of course, you have to walk your talk. Okay, I like this photo on the left very much because the young guys are looking into you. And then if you try to help them to formulate their future, you can help them to set a boundary. But when they explore, how can they facilitate the exploration and then fitting the jigsaw puzzle in the right places? Looking at you as a role model would be an important thing. So parents, are you able to be a role model? And here, are you able to encourage them, support them to exemplify their potentials? This photo is useful because it talks about vineyards. And then a lot of people, they will be just comfortably picking up grapes at the hand, arms level. Few of them would go up and reach for those at the top or bother to kneel down to get those lower down. Okay, so would you challenge them to stretch a little bit and reach different horizons? And then we now also talk about a lot of study tours, exposure, and then going to different countries. But instead of going for sightseeing tours and living in privileged places, luxurious places, can you really send your children to go to deprived places and really get some raw materials and help to build bricks, build bridges, build houses? That will be a much more worthwhile than a sightseeing and shopping study tour. Okay, and then hopefully they can get some satisfaction from such compassionate work, and then this will fuel them in thinking more about life. And last but not least, I hope you can also prepare them to note and deal effectively with possible temptations, which sometimes creeps into our life without our noting it. Okay, this applies to adults and to children, and hopefully as a family together, we can work together to identify and prevent. And of course, if you have idea of some resources like what is available in Hong Kong on Hong Kong students' mental health, and also addressing some of the special educational needs, that would also be useful as well. And then just now, Dr. Slayton is talking about my work on parent education. Maybe I can leave it later. While I finish, I hope to remind ourselves to continue. Even though the topic today seems challenging, we hope to continue to be faithful, hopeful, and loving. And these are the major anchorages for any families and parents. Okay, so I think I will stop for now, and then I'll pass the time to our moderators. Thank you.
Dr. Sandra, thank you. That was extremely helpful on many levels, which is why we are so privileged to be part of this webinar. Just as a quick reminder to everybody, if you are just tuning in, there is a opportunity to hear this in Mandarin. If you're watching on the Zoom platform, go on the lower right of your Zoom screens, click that, and then you can switch to the Chinese option, but please put the audio on mute so that you might hear the Mandarin translations for you. So quick question, Dr. Sandra, before we go to our next speaker, and for everybody that is watching, please do start sending in your questions, because after the next speaker, we will have Dr. Sandra back with the next speaker, and you guys can ask your questions and we'll answer it as best we can. I'll say that again, as best we can.
Yes.
With our limited time. So Dr. Sandra, again, wonderful presentation. What really spoke to me as a dad and someone in the family space is when you showed the suicide rates, and you showed that 26.4% were from school and work-related sort of stress for children. And you gave so many practical ways on how to help build resilience. Can you just give us maybe a few pointers on ways to build resilience in that specific way to overcome school and work-related stress for children?
Well, I think, understanding your child, understanding yourself would be the basic starting points, so that we can pitch realistic expectations. So understanding their age development and their unique competence, whether they have strengths and weakness and what they are, then you can pitch the right expectation, and that reduces sense of failure to the parents and also to the child, and then bank on some of their strengths, even if they have to struggle through difficulties in schoolwork. I work a lot with children with specific educational needs, dyslexia, ASD, and also ADHD. And very often it is very challenging to parents. And then their expectations might not be passing this test, but getting some marks, not getting a 0 anymore. So the goal is not passing, not even passing, but not getting a 0. Okay, because the child can only barely manage that. So knowing your child, knowing yourself, and then having realistic expectations would be a nice starting point.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Sandra. And then more questions for you in a bit. In the meantime, We're going to call back Professor Slayton, who will introduce our next world-class speaker. Very exciting. Professor Slayton.
Thank you very much, Edric, and thank you, Dr. Sandra. That was wonderful. I'm taking notes here myself because there's so much every mom, every dad can learn. So our second speaker is also a world-class expert. In fact, she's a best-selling author 8 times over, which is pretty impressive. She and her wonderful husband are friends and have been colleagues in many ways. Miss Rosanna Lin is an accomplished author, as I mentioned. She also speaks before large groups on parenthood, family development, and education. She will be sharing with us important observations that we can all relate to from her years of working with families. With her expansive knowledge of both Asian and Western family dynamics, plus her experience in working with youth, we are guaranteed to have some great takeaways from this next speaker. We're also going to be hearing from their son, Caleb Lin. And I think this is going to be fascinating because frankly, the world that our children are growing up in is completely different than the world we grew up in. So I'm excited to hear from Caleb. Caleb is a former avid gamer, something he has in common with my sons. And he has successfully channeled his passion and time into a high energy sport, rock wall climbing. So Rosanna and Caleb, we are super honored to have you with us. I know we're going to learn a great deal from you. And let me turn it over to you both. Rosanna?
Thank you so much, Dr. Slayton, for that very kind introduction. I am going to just come in as a mom of 3 very rambunctious boys who were very naughty because when they were small, they were full of energy and gave me many headaches. But now they're grown and they know I love them and they love me back. And I wanted to interview my son, Caleb. Caleb, are you there?
Hey, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Slayton, as well for the amazing introduction.
So we are both now living in the same city, and Caleb is now all grown up and working for a gaming company of all professions. And Caleb, I know that you've struggled with many difficulties, including roommate who was suicidal, including very high study pressure. You were in local Chinese school for a number of years, learning Chinese from zero, starting 6th grade. You went through a lot of hardships, but actually so did your 2 younger brothers.
Right.
And
All
you're
of us.
very different. So I guess I wanted you to share some of what it's like to grow up facing all these difficulties, and how is it that you've observed the way we've done family together that has helped 3 such very different boys of very different personalities and reactions to circumstances kind of become resilient in the face of these challenges?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that I can definitely say for all 3 of the brothers is that from a very young age, I feel like we all had a very warm home where we felt very loved and secured, so that when we did move to China, when I was 10 years old, my brother was 8 years old, and my youngest brother was 2 years old. So when we moved to China at that time, and there was all this instability, we had like a good foundation of family to rely on. And so when the difficult times came, we could rely on each other as a family and as brothers to be our community. And so in that sense, I think like that really helped us to not get too discouraged, even though it was really hard. So I know for my middle brother, I think he had the hardest time adjusting when we moved to China. He had a really hard time making friends. He had a really hard time learning the language and getting used to things. But for me, I was really lucky when I first got to a Chinese school. I was able to make some friends who were other foreign speaking students there. And so that really helped me to integrate as well and face the challenges together with other people. And then I think my younger brother, for him, he was motivated a lot by beating me. So when he saw me doing better at things, I think he was like, okay, I got to do better. And he ended up like doing way better than me. And I ended up staying mostly in the like kind of like the international program at a Chinese school, but he actually went full on into Bashizhong, which if you're from China, it's a very prestigious middle school, and he tested fully into it. So my younger brothers have plenty of amazing experiences with resilience that they can speak to.
So I know that you faced a very difficult time biting off a huge project after you graduated from high school. You took a year off to do your own projects before going off to college, and there was a lot of difficulty there. How did you manage to bounce back from just feeling like all your friends left you and you were just all alone, watching everybody on Facebook having a really great time in college? Why did you want to take a gap year, and what were you doing with a gap year?
Yeah, so actually before I went to college, I originally wanted to be a writer, and I made a deal with my parents saying that if I can succeed as a writer, then you have to let me drop out of college. And so I took a gap year to write a book. I had actually written a book already in high school, but I hadn't published it. So the goal during my gap year was to write another book and get it published. And I think for me, I had this dream of becoming a writer, and I wanted to prove to my parents that it was possible. And I wanted to prove to them, my mom would often like come in and like almost like joke with me, like, are you really gonna do it? Like, are you gonna be able to like actually become a writer? And so I think that sense of like, even though I saw all my friends having a really great time in college, me personally, like wanting to do something to prove to my parents that I could do it and prove to myself that I could do it was a huge motivation for me to push through. Like, I mean, I spent so much time alone during that year. I went to the cafe like almost every day and just wrote alone. I had to hang out with my brother's friends because I didn't have any friends anymore. It was it was a tough year, but I think just having a goal in mind really helps you to push past pain. And I think like having a sense of like where you want to be in the short term and the long term helps you to become more resilient.
You had mentioned that you had some really great tips for other young people in terms of pain tolerance. You know that I know that you take a lot of pride in pain tolerance because
Yeah.
you keep lifting heavier weights. What were some of the reasons that you wanted to even tolerate the pain in the first place? And what are some of these tips you can share?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. It took me a while to figure out why. I was like, I wonder if I just like pain more than other people? But I think actually me and especially my younger brother, my middle brother, Jonathan, we grew up
Yes.
reading a lot of like action novels and books where like the main character, or like fantasy, sci-fi, where the main character is like, I don't know, like their whole, like the human race got destroyed or everything is really, really bad, right? And they're like struggling to survive, but then somehow they become the hero of the story. And I noticed like one thing that all these heroes had in common is that they're really good at like pushing through difficult things and pushing through pain. And like, you know, the kind of like the crux of the story is usually when the hero is like beaten up and like about to fall down, but then they get back up, right? And then they beat the bad guy. And I think like reading those stories growing up for me, what made me think, hey, I want to be someone that doesn't like, that can just shrug off pain, you know? And so I think even like in high school, I actually started actively like trying to do things that were painful but good. So like working out is a really good example of that, where you push yourself really hard when you're working out, and it's painful because it's physically painful, but you learn that like that physical pain makes you stronger. So working out is a really good way, in my opinion, to like train your mind to be okay with pain.
And what do you get out of tolerating pain?
I think like one thing that you realize if you read broadly, like you read fiction, read nonfiction, you just look at people who are successful in the world, like the result of enduring pain is usually growth. Like if you endure pain and you push through it and you keep pushing through that, you grow in some way, right? Like either you become a better person because you're being kind, even though people are being mean to you, or you become stronger because you're working out. But I think like the only way to grow, to like truly grow in life, is to go through some type of pain and to be better than that pain.
That sounds good. And the resulting growth, what does the growth bring you to make you willing to tolerate even more pain?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, there are definitely cases of people who like endure pain and they grow in ways that they don't necessarily want to, right? And then they're they don't understand why they've grown that way. And PTSD is a form of growth in response to pain. So there are definitely bad ways to respond to pain, but I think it's important to have a very clear idea of who you want to be and the direction that you want to grow in. And so if you don't have an idea of how you want to grow, then when you do grow, it's not going to feel as satisfying, right? But if you have an idea of who you want to be and how you want to grow, and you endure pain for that growth and you see yourself grow, that helps develop confidence in yourself and it empowers you to grow in other areas.
That's great. So any parting words before I go on to my part to share some tips? Do you have any tips for young people who are battling either depression or something really hard going on at home, or maybe even a friend who's going through suicidal tendencies, maybe feeling a sense of failure? What kinds of advice, tips do you have for other kids that might be a little bit slightly younger than you?
Yeah, so first of all, there are two people that have really influenced my thinking. The first one is Tim Ferriss. He is a very prolific author that writes about how to be productive and more become a better version of yourself. And then the second is a book written by David Goggins called Can't Hurt Me. And that book is literally about how to make yourself more resilient. So if you are looking to be more resilient, that is the book to read. It's called Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And what both of these authors have in common is that they espouse the idea that developing a practice of working out, either running or just doing daily fitness that is painful and not just easy, but actually pushing yourself physically, helps you to develop the resilience needed to actually do more things in other parts of your life. So it's the idea that successful CEOs usually have a very strict workout routine, right?
What about any parting words for parents who are struggling, watching their children struggle, or seeing that their kids are not in a good place? Do you have any words of advice or encouragement for parents from a child's point of view?
Yeah, I would say do physical things with your child, go take them hiking, take them running, take them boating, find something that you can do together where you sweat. And I think that you're going to develop such a good time. I'll post it in chat right afterwards. But I would say for parents, it's so easy to bond with your child when you're doing something. You don't have to have anything in common to do things, right? So just do something with your child and when you sweat together and you have that sense of oh, we made it to the top of the mountain, or oh, we made it across the river, kayaking. That feeling of accomplishing something together is incredible and it creates cohesion.
Yes, and I know as a parent who goes rock climbing with my kids, I'm always the slowest and worst one. And that actually makes me become more human to you guys, because you get to rescue me sometimes.
Right, yeah. I think that's a really good feeling for kids as well, when you get to teach your parent something that you love. That's also really incredible feeling as well.
Great. Well, Caleb, we don't have too much time. So thank you so much for agreeing to come and be interviewed by me. And don't forget to share that book title and any tips. And I will go on to my part, I think.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I'll post it in chat.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, since we are very limited for time, I'm just going to go straight into sharing my PowerPoint. And tonight, I'd like to do everything in threes, because I have 3 boys and I am in a family of 3 girls. I am the eldest girl. So I wanted to just leave everyone with 3 simple points about the very important foundational factors for parents to remember in cultivating resilience in your children. And then along with the 3 important points you need to remember are 3 very practical tips that you can take home today and try it at home and see how things work. But all of those tips involve you building a habit. So I would challenge you to try these habits at home for 30 days in a row. And after 30 days, if you feel like, it's not really working, then try something else. Okay, so the first factor in cultivating resilience is unconditional love. And you might think that's very easy and you've heard it so many times, but how many times have we in our process of growing up felt like, if I don't study well, if I don't get good grades, if I don't get a good job, if I marry somebody my parents don't like, then my parents won't love me anymore. Or have you heard parents saying to their kids, okay, if you're not a good girl, I'm going to send you to the orphanage. Or if you're not a good girl, I'm going to send you to jail, to the police, and I don't want you anymore. How many of us have heard that growing up or have spoken that to ourselves? And many times when we feel that our parents' love of us is conditional, I think being loved unconditionally is really great, but loving unconditionally is very tough. For example, I would like to challenge parents, when you go home, ask your children if you came home with, let's say, a 0, whatever you think is this really bad thing, with a 0 on your test, or you got drunk, or you got pregnant, do you know if mommy and daddy will still love you? And it would be really interesting to hear what their response is, because that's a true indicator of whether or not they feel your love is conditional. Many times we feel like, I'm just not good enough. I need to be better. I need to perform to deserve or earn my parents' love. And that is what the performance orientation is. And many of us from Asian backgrounds, we grow up hearing, you need to be the best, you need to be number one, you need to have good grades, you need to do this. And we often feel like there are so many conditions for us to finally deserve that love that many of us feel discouraged when we don't get it. So I would really encourage for parents ourselves to reflect on growing up. Have you received that unconditional love? Have you felt totally accepted? And if you haven't, I would really appeal to you to really address that, so that you can come out of this orphan mindset that if I'm not good enough, I'm going to be abandoned, and then get into a community where you can heal from that orphan mindset, so that you can pass on that sonship or daughtership to your children, and let them know that no matter what happens, you're going to love them and accept them. And I wanted to in the context of that identity, I would like to offer the second tip for parents, and that is that it's really important for your children to be in a relational network that is secure and intimate, that is accepting, so that if they don't feel that mommy and daddy loves them, they can know that maybe grandpa and grandma loves them, or maybe there's a teacher at school, or a counselor at church, or a big brother in their youth group, someone in their relational network that helps them to foster a sense of belonging. And what do you mean by belonging? I would like to share this picture by this author called Andy Crouch. He gives us this 4 quadrants to help us understand when we feel a sense of belonging. Now, on the upper left quadrant, we see that when we are known by our parents, but we're not loved. For example, let's say we're not very good at math, and our parents are, and they know that I'm not good at math. So they don't love me because I'm not good at math, or I'm not very smart. I'm not as smart as my brother or sister. In that case, I will go through life feeling rejected because I know there's something that they don't accept about me. Then you go to the bottom left corner, and that's even worse. That's because my parents don't even care about me. Maybe they work in a different city. Maybe they're so busy and stressed from their own work or their marriage, they don't know who I am, what I like, what I don't like, and they don't particularly love me either. In that sense, I feel ignored, neglected, and rejected. So I feel like I'm abandoned. Then you move over to the lower right quadrant where I'm loved, but I'm not known. In that case, I feel like I'm walking through life wearing a mask of who people expect me to be, because I'm just trying to fit in to earn their love or to deserve that image that I've made of myself. In that case, I fit in, I'm loved, but I'm not known. In that case, I go through life feeling afraid that people would discover who I really am and not love me. Finally, I would like to encourage everyone to go into the top right corner to encourage belonging. And what does that mean? Our children are known and loved. So I'll give you an example of my boys. Caleb is super slow. He is so slow, it drives me crazy sometimes that I just want to push him to hurry up. But then again, he is so patient with his brothers because he can take the time to listen. So I know these strengths and weaknesses about him, and I love him completely. On the other hand, his younger brother, Jonathan, is the complete opposite. He is so impatient with people. He gets mad a lot because other people can't keep up with him. But then again, Jonathan is so quick that whenever I need to get things done, I always look for him because he can help me. And in that way, he is completely known because I know his strengths and weaknesses. Now, each child is equally important to my family because without them, my family would be incomplete. And that's what belonging means. You know, there is a study out of Emory University where they conducted all these, they interviewed all these kids about their family stories, and they asked them 20 questions called Do You Know? And they asked questions like, do you know how your grandparents got married and how your parents met and things about their family history. And they discovered that kids who know more about their family history actually have much greater resilience than kids who don't. And why is that? It's because when I am struggling about who I am, what my story is, knowing that I belong to a bigger story, a bigger family, makes me understand that I can be like them. When I go through tough times just like they do, I see how they have come through tough times and they have stuck together. And that gives me hope that I belong to part of this bigger story and that I will be okay. So are you helping your kids to belong into a bigger community? And that's what I wanted to talk about next. This is a picture of a recent family reunion where David, my husband David, and my side of the family all got together and had a meal of dim sum together, which is how a lot of gatherings happen. And this is what I wanted to say. Many of us here are single parents, whether you're single mom or single dad. It's very tough to raise a kid by yourself. Well, in that case, you need to also rely on your extended family to provide healthy models of relationships, of marriages, of male and female role models, so that your children can have an idea of what a family is like. And sometimes we have blended families. And you know, in the old days, we have villages. So if mom and dad get in a fight, you just duck under auntie or uncle's roof, or maybe grandma can feed you dinner until the storm dies down and you can go home and sleep. But in today's world, we have a family that's more and more shattered and broke and fragmented. And that uncle and auntie or cousin or grandma is usually not living next door and usually not accessible to us. So oftentimes when extended family is not accessible, we rely on our third family. And what does third family compose of? Well, it could be a big brother or sister in church, in a youth group, or it could be godparents. So for example, each of our kids have godparents that help them, pray for them and oversee their spiritual growth. And we in turn now have 3 goddaughters that we pray for and we oversee their spiritual growth. And in that way, we also have a church family. We also have the community, the school community, and we volunteer at school, and we have the greater community, and that composes our third community. So there are many ways to foster a child's belonging. If you say, well, my marriage is in a rough patch right now, then they can fall back on the second and the third family that we have helped them to build and strengthen. In that sense, we can build that sense of belonging. And how does that help our children to bounce back? Well, Bill Gates' dad, Bill Gates Sr., he wrote this book called Showing Up for Life. And he recounts the story where when Bill Gates was a teenager and he was thinking about life direction, And he didn't want to listen to his dad because he didn't think his dad had any good advice. So his dad introduced him to a friend of his. And after Bill went to see this friend, this friend gave him this advice that was really good. And Bill was really excited. And he came home and said, Dad, you know, that friend of yours is so wise. He gave me the best advice. And his dad said, so what is it? And after Bill said it, Bill Gates Sr. thought to himself, you know, this is exactly the advice that he was trying to give his son. But because it came from somebody else's mouth to this teenager, it sounded like golden advice, even though it was the exact same thing. So many times our children, just because they hear the words that are familiar to them, might be more receptive to somebody else, a mentor who will give the same advice, but it just seems that they're more credible. So are we careful to cultivate those types of relationships for them in our greater community so that when they want to seek a second, third, or fourth opinion, they have people to go to? Okay, so before we get to the final tip, I would like to give these 3 practical tips for us to do at home, try out at home, and then end with the last important point. So the first tip is the do hard things exercise. So something that we do at home and something that we challenged our goddaughters to do is this do hard things. You can see from this phone chart, and here I have a Chinese version as well, do hard things. So you can see that the parents are challenging themselves to do hard things. Why is that important? It's really important to let kids know that you're on their team and you're not this jail warden that's telling them to do these things, and you're just sitting back, relaxing, and doing the easy things. So you can see mom and dad in this situation, both, for them, it's really hard to shut off the cell phone after 9. So that's their do hard thing. That's their hard thing that week. And each child has a hard thing. So for the older sister, it could be journaling for 15 minutes to improve her writing skill. And for youngest sister, it could be practice her Chinese writing for 40 minutes. And after, our challenge to them is that after a week, Monday to Friday, 5 days of doing hard things, circling yes every day, we as their godparents promise to take them out for shaved ice, for a nice snack. And they had such success and such fun with this exercise. They're doing hard things every week. And it doesn't have to be a drag or so such a 扫兴, so unhappy, because you are ending each challenge with a celebration of having done hard things and feeling like I'm strong and I can overcome challenges. So that's the first tip. Second tip is that we have a habit of reflection after you suffer some pain. So when we are coaching our kids that when pain comes, when we reflect on this pain, we can grow. And you saw that with Caleb. So we have a habit at home of reflecting on our highs and lows every day. Every day we share with each other, my highs is this, and then we give thanks together for this high. And then what are our lows? Well, maybe my best friend ignored me at school. Then after you share this, you can share how you feel, and you can reflect on what you might have learned from this low. So that's a habit that we've continued every day, and our kids have found very helpful. Maybe you can try it too. Finally, the last habit is this one of self-coaching. We usually, after they make a mistake or they fall, we usually go through, and this is from my husband, David, who is our kids' soccer and baseball coach. And after each game, we huddle up and we ask, so what did I do well? And what did I miss? And next time, how will I do this differently by stopping what I'm doing or starting something new? And when you have these self-reflection questions, you find that there's always room to grow, and you always can celebrate your growth. So finally, the last point of reminder is to bring meaning behind everything you do. So I will very briefly share this story of Caleb when he was in China going to local school and had to go to military training. He asked me if I wanted to be accepted by my friends and be looked on as Chinese and not as American, do I need to go to this military camp? And I said, you know, Caleb, it's up to you. Why don't you go and pray about it and think about it, and then I support your decision 100%. And he said, you know, Mom, it's really important to me right now. All my friends are saying, hey, American, American. I want to be looked on as a Chinese. So I can't just take the good things. I need to suffer with them as well. So he decided to go to military camp. And first day, he wanted to come home so badly, he called me. And I encouraged him to hang in for another day. And if he really, really finds it hard, he can call me back the next day. But he didn't. He finished the whole week. And he came home with this big red flower. And he said, Mom, out of the camp of over 1,000 kids, I was one of the 5 people who was nominated and rewarded with his red flower for good attitude and for doing my military exercises properly. And he experienced so many miracles. When he came home, he was on shoulder to shoulder with 2 Chinese, and they're treating him like fellow Chinese friends. And he said, Mom, look, I'm a Chinese now. And that was the reward waiting for him at the end of that suffering. And for him, it was totally worth it. So for him, that suffering had meaning because he had a greater yes or a greater goal behind it, which he achieved. So I encourage you to encourage your children that no matter what you do, to look for the meaning behind what you do and look for a goal so that you are willing to tolerate the pain and bounce back from it.
Thank you, Rosanna. Again, it was wonderful not just hearing you and your son, but unpacking even your own added insights. It was wonderful. We want to remind everyone that is watching something that we're doing for the first time in this webinar series before we go to the question to Rosanna is this. The Family First Global team is actually giving door prizes, meaning if you are from any of the countries in which there is a Family First national chapter, 10 of you in each of those chapters will receive a prize. So if you stay tuned up until the end, our team and organizers here will then choose the 10 and send those door prizes your way. So please stay tuned for that as we move into the question with Rosanna and invite Dr. Sandra earlier so that we might answer a lot of the questions that you guys have been sending. In the meantime, keep sending the questions. So, babe.
Yeah, I just want to say that I took lots of notes here.
Same here.
And yeah, I really enjoyed your talk because I could really resonate with the things that you were sharing as a mom and even your interview with your son, Caleb. One of the things I wanted to ask was, how do you repair a relationship that's been broken with your child and they're feeling that rejection, they're feeling ignored or not known? And so how do you fix that?
I have had broken relationships with each of my kids at different points. And the lesson I've learned from each incident is that I need to be willing to put down my pride and my dignity and walk into their world. So if my child is addicted to video games, I'm going to go play video games with them because I want to enter his world and I want to go low and just learn from him. So this is why my husband and I still climb rocks, even though it's putting calluses on our hands, not because we love it, but because we want to enter our children's world and learn from them.
Right. Rosanna, at what point does it not make sense to actually enter their world? For example, if they're deep in drugs or any of these dangerous addictions, obviously we don't enter their spaces there. Any advice in those contexts?
In those contexts, what I would highly encourage parents to do is to take the kids away from that context and build relationships by enjoying something together. So if it's a drug addict, maybe you can enjoy singing together. Find some childhood activities that you enjoy doing together. For example, my second child enjoyed looking at bugs, playing with bugs. And we go to the zoo and go catch some butterflies, something where you actually once connected over something that was pleasurable and build pleasure and experience pleasure together. And once you do that, then you gain some influence and you can listen to their pain and walk them out of that situation.
Thank you. That's super interesting because I think a lot of times we want our kids to do what we like to do, but what you're saying is we need to get into their world and let them know, hey, I like enjoying this with you, something that is meaningful to you and important to you. Thank you so much. I think we're gonna now
Call Dr. Sandra back on.
Dr.
Yeah.
Sandra back on too.
And this is the moment I
Yeah,
want to
can
do
I
a-
supplement? Can I supplement the answer just now? I think another thing is to reflect on your own self, because I was talking about role
Yes.
modeling as well. Did you miss anything, or have you done anything not very okay that make them do something to tell you that, well, you are messing up our family life. Can you correct that? So sometimes children's behavior could be reminding us, well, come on, parents, do something to self-correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wanted to just quickly say that one of the things that we practice in our home is we actually sit our kids down and we ask them, is there anything that I've done that has hurt you? And how can we improve? And then we ask for their forgiveness. So that's also
Yes.
starting. But I love what you guys both said, that we need to be aware. And then Rosanna emphasized that we need to let our kids know that we really like being with them.
Yeah, we don't just love you, but we like
Yes.
you, enjoy you. We like to say that, right? So let's open up now for all of us, and we have Professor Slayton as well in our panel. So there is a question that goes like this. I read an article that says if you involve your children to do house chores, it can help to make them more resilient and prepare them even for career and business. But the concern of this parent is my children many times used to do house chores, even though I already explained the positive effects of doing it.
We have 4 kids, and of course, no kids love to do chores. That's just reality.
Yes.
But I think it's very important to help your children, our children, to understand you are part of the family. You're 4 years old, you're 5 years old, you have a responsibility, right? And the problem today is so many kids are so spoiled, so entitled. Let me just be honest. This is a special problem when you have only one child in a family. Everyone is doting on that child, the mom, the dad, the grandparents, everyone's doting on that child. Totally opposite how it was 100 years ago. So no matter what, if you have one child or 7 children or 10 children, you have to make sure each child has, maybe just take out the garbage or do your bed or do something. And discipline is important. I just want to say that, we have a 10-to-1 rule, 10 times love and affection and affirmation for every 1 time discipline. But you have to have the discipline. So for example, the kids are like, hey, I'm not doing my chores, but Dad, I need a ride to the baseball game. Well, guess what, son? I'm not taking you to the baseball game because why should I? You didn't do your job. Why should I do my job? Oh, Dad, you do that once or twice, and all of a sudden, son gets the idea that I better take out the garbage.
So we have the habit of doing chores together. It's very tough in Beijing because we have a maid. And so our kids feel like, hey, you pay our maid. Why do we need to work? So, it doesn't matter. We're all family members. If Dad is mopping the floor and taking out the trash, then you're going to do the dishes and Mom will wipe the fudge off the wall. We all do something and we make it a fun family activity with celebration afterwards.
I like that. So important is modeling and add some fun to the chores. That's great. Dr. Sandra.
Well, in Hong Kong, we also have the privilege of having helpers at home. But I and my husband decided to stop having this privilege since my younger son entered secondary school. So over the past 18 years or so, both of us have been doing all the household chores, despite us having full-time jobs all over the years. So this is a commitment, this is a role modeling, and this is the reality for them. So both of them can cook and they can do a lot of household chores. And of course, we role model, we give recognition, and then we take pride in the 4 of us sharing out everything.
Right. Before we go to the next question, let's flip this around. There are some parents that are overcompensating. They're doing all the chores.
They're overfunctioning.
They're overfunctioning, right? They're doing everything. The kids are just there.
I don't think it's just even chores. Like they overfunction in the sense that they're always rescuing their children, which probably contributes to them not being as resilient as well. So how do you also speak to that?
Can I share screen?
Sure.
Now, this is one slide that I want to finish up with, and that is part of the key ideas of our parent education curriculum framework for Hong Kong. And the tips for helping healthy and family to be happy and healthy would be start with understanding child development and your own development so that you can promote healthy, happy, and balanced child development. But one important element we want to emphasize would be promoting parents' physical and psychological functioning, well-being, and foster homeschool cooperation. Okay, it is very important because the parents will be spearheading the running of the family. And if they are functioning well, instead of getting easily burnt out so that they bring their stress and the frustration and then they let it on the children, that is not going to be very nice. Okay, and in a lot of places, the schools are also very ready to help parents to work with the children, especially on, for example, giving them a lot of opportunities to develop aside from academic studies. So if I have to remind the parents, protecting your own physical, psychological, and social, and if you have religion, your spiritual functioning is very important because you are the pillar of the family, and then you are also driving the family to sail smooth. Okay, so maybe I stop share and then see how we go with other Q&A.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Sandra. Rosanna, Professor Sting, do you want to add to that?
Because I have a family of boys, the dad is always saying, "Mom needs your help," and so I very consciously weaken myself or make myself weak, not because I'm not capable, but because I have to remember that when I am weak, they can become stronger. And so when we go any place, grocery shopping, they take all the groceries. And when when we're traveling, they take all the luggage, and we have to create space for them to help us.
Yeah.
And and that's so hard. You know, so many times I'm tempted to just go in and just rescue. And you know, when we were training our son to wash dishes, and he does it, there's bubbles under the plates, and you just want to just do it for them. And then David would just force me to stop and say, "No, you can't do that. You need to stand there and tell him what is acceptable to you, and take the time to grind through the process so that they can be empowered to do what they are capable of doing." And that's much harder for us rescuers.
Yes, yes. Waiting for response and creating space for people to contribute is very important. And it is very hard for people who are quick-tempered, like myself. My girls say that I normally do things 6 times faster than other people. So I have to hold back. And then really create space and allow them to. So that's why I say understanding your child and yourself is very important, because that involves a lot of matching, waiting, prompting, encouragement, and this and that. So it is an ongoing process, but we can all learn. And then if we're honest with ourselves and we are committed to loving our family, we can do it.
That's funny how they said 6 times is very specific.
Yeah.
3 to 6
That
times.
sounds very intimidating, actually.
Right.
I think what we're hearing from this is we should also be willing to allow our children to fail forward, because if we're trying to fix everything for them because we don't want them to fail, but yet we don't allow them to go through the process of failing and then learning from their failures, that also sets them up to not be able to be resilient.
Agreed.
There's an important question.
There's
here.
one, I think, big theme that both Rosanna and Professor Slayton touched on a little bit. It's a specific question about gaming. Now, this particular viewer says, "My daughter likes playing games very much. She often can't control her time. If she plays for too long, what should I do?" And I think the question we have is not just this practical, what should I do? Because Rosanna touched a little bit on it by going into their world, right? But how important is it that you think as parents, we should control this gaming, because it can go in so many different addictive directions, right? So can you speak to that? And how important do you think it is in building resilience today?
Ladies first.
My kids have often fielded this question, and they basically said that they're too busy to play games. They have so many different interests and passions. They have their teams, sports, they have their lab experiments, they have their bands, they have their friends that they want to hang out with, that when their lives are so full, they automatically will shut off the games because that's less important. So it's actually much easier to cultivate many interests than to I guess I make the analogy that don't make the kids keep dumping out bad water, but fill it with good water, and they don't have to keep dumping and emptying it.
I like that. I think we call that analog time, right? Instead of just digital, we need to give the replacements because one passion will consume another. I love that point. If you want to get them out of it, then redirect it. Anybody want to add to that, Professor Slayton, your experience?
Go ahead, Sandra.
Yeah, I always recommend volunteering, parent and child volunteering, because it really forces them or makes them jump out of the normal lifestyle. Because when I see you forcing me out from my beloved games, you're such a dreadful mom, or you're such a dreadful dad, so I hate you. Okay, and when I see you indulging in the games, I also hate you as my child. But if we jumped out of all this lifestyle and then we try to do something meaningful together, and then I suddenly realized, Mom, you can really go to the beach and then really get all those broken glasses and dirty shoes and then put them in the litter bag. It looks like you are very loving to the environment and loving to the people around you. And then you also see your child being so hot under the sun, but staying there with you for 3 hours, sweating and then doing hard work. And then you have a lot of good memories. And then you talk about this, and then you have a nice topic when you see other people. You say, yes, yesterday we were there, and then it was tough. And then, so it gives you a different agenda and a common shared experience, which is meaningful and going beyond what is the daily routine, which is nasty.
I love that. Professor Slayton.
Yeah, Cedric, I just want to add something a little bit different dynamic. And that's one thing I just want to encourage everyone on this call to pray for your children. Now, I know we come from different faiths, and that's fine. That's good. I personally am a Christian. I was saved by a Chinese family. It's a long story, but it has made all the difference to my children. And I've seen miracles. We were talking about gaming. One of my kids was a big time gamer. And we just really set out to just pray about that every day and to help him, as Dr. Sandra and Rosanna are talking about, to steer him into a different direction, right? And he got into college, he was doing other things, and then he got out of college, thank God, and he graduated and he got a real job. And now he's working all the time. And because he wants to be successful. It's not a game anymore. Now it's real. And he wants to hit his sales quotas and do well. But I think the prayer was critical. And I can't exactly tell you how it works or anything. I'm not an expert, but I'm telling you, it's important. I just want to encourage everybody on this call to pray for your children.
That's excellent. Thank you, Professor Slayton. We have a question now that deals with motivation, right? And I think this is a big thing also when we speak of resilience and fragility. This particular viewer says, I have 4 kids, 16-year-old girl, 14-year-old girl, 11-year-old son, and she's saying that it's hard to communicate with the 16-year-old and the 14-year-old girl. And the 11-year-old doesn't seem to want to study, or all 3 of them, the 16, 14, and 11 don't seem to want to study. The motivation is not high, but they do have other interests like sports. Can you give tips to this parent who's trying to motivate, especially their teenaged children?
I think let's frame this question a little bit. I think.
Wait, Rosanna's ready. Go ahead.
Okay, you're ready.
Okay. I actually teach a class on preparing for teenagers. One of the things that's toughest for us to do as parents is to switch roles and get ready to treat our kids as adults. They think they're adults, but they still need us. But one of the worst things that can happen is that we continue to function as if we're talking to 3-year-olds and commanding them to do this and that. one of the things that you could do is to humble yourself. And if they're not keen on let's say homework, is it possible for you to ask them to show you how they do their homework so well, or to teach you something to help them feel that you actually respect them and that they have something to teach you. And once they gain that sense of self-efficacy or that sense of confidence that they actually have some competence, that can spread to other areas. That's a first step.
Yeah.
Thank you,
maybe
Sandra. Go ahead, Dr. Sandra.
Yeah. One tip is to talk to them and then break down the task. Normally we have to finish homework, otherwise the teachers will be after all of us, not just the children, but after parents as well. So we have to break them down. And then I appreciate what Joy was saying. We give them choices. Just now you talk about your son not willing to go through the race, okay? But then if you allow him some choices, and in terms of homework, the choice is not completing or not completing the homework, but completing which one first. And even if it is a mathematics exercise, there can be some sections which are more difficult. Some sections seems to be easier. So your choice would be not deciding not to complete the best assignment, but completing the more difficult parts first, or completing the easier parts first. And then the third tips would be to really have a realistic expectation, and then work on the controllable and not work on the uncontrollable parts. For example, my son has a lot of difficulty learning languages. He has a mild degree of dyslexia. So our job in revision will be revise 3 times, regardless of the results. So the achievable thing is revise 3 times. The uncontrollable thing would be the marks. So I won't bother about your marks. If you have revised 3 times, job is done. Okay, so he pushed through, he went through, and then he was good with spoken language, not reading or written language when he was young. But now he has finished a good degree, and then he's doing well, and then he speaks well and he writes well, and he can comment on my presentations. So eventually they work through.
You know, I really like what you're saying, because I think it points back to sometimes we're so overly focused on the grades and the marks that we put this kind of pressure on our children that's not healthy. But if we emphasize the character, like do the effort, I want to reward your character and the hard work, then that allows them to keep trying, rather than, well, oh, I don't want to try because I'm not going to do well, because I'm kind of behind and I might fail with my grades, and maybe mom and dad won't be happy with me. But if we're focusing on the effort, which is the character part, and then you surrender the grades part to the Lord.
Yes, exactly.
Professor Steen,
and you pray for them as a professor Steen.
Did you want anything to that before we wind down our whole Q&A time?
Very briefly, yeah, those are 2 great questions. One is about communication, the other is about motivation. So we've got to keep the communication channels going with our children. That is vitally important. And sometimes parents come to me and they say, oh, you know, my kid is like this and that and stuff like that. But that's just the point. You're the parent. That's the kid. We have to be the parent. Sometimes, oh, kids can be so frustrated. Oh, my goodness, you know, but we have to love them, right? We have to keep the communication going. We have to let them know, you know, you got, some of you guys have heard me talk, right? That you do 3 things with each one of your child once a week. Give them a big hug, tell them how much you love them, and tell them no matter what happens, you're going to be with them for the rest of their life. You do that every week, you're going to change your kid's future, and you're going to keep that vital communication going. Again, give them a big hug. I know I grew up in a Chinese family. I get it. We don't do the hug thing. Yeah, whatever. Maybe that worked 100 years ago. It doesn't work anymore. Your kids need physical affection. Give them a big hug. Tell them, I love you so much. Yeah, I know you wrecked the car last week. I still love you. All right. And number 3, I'm going to be with you, son, for the rest of your life. Daughter, no matter what happens, I'm with you. I'm for you for the rest of your life. You do that once a week with your kids, you're going to change their lives, and you're going to have a great relationship. And that will give them motivation also, because they realize mom believes in me, dad believes in me, I'm important.
That's awesome. Thanks, Professor Slade. I think it works even for marriages, babe. I love you so much. I want to hug you right now. So if you're
There you go,
married,
buddy.
so wait, I think Rosanna wanted to say something before I wind down. Go ahead, Rosanna.
Yes, may I just bring us back to that tip about everybody doing hard things. If every week we have a habit of challenging ourselves with doing one hard thing, including mom and dad, then we can steer them to consider tackling homework or improving their grades or a certain aspect of math as their hard thing that week, so that they can get a sense of accomplishment having done that hard thing. That's their own definition.
Fantastic. So one last tip on this point of motivation. What I've learned is it's important to also have a floor and a ceiling to keep them motivated. What does that mean? Do we have incentives for them to do that thing that will drive them towards the incentive? But if it's just incentive based and there's no consequence, then if they don't feel it's worth it, then they won't do it. So also have a floor. What is the consequence if I don't do that thing? And it has to be a consequence that obviously they will want to avoid. So that in their mind, it's a win-win. I avoid the consequence, I get the incentive, motivation carries on. So thank you again for the wonderful insights. We wish we had more time. We say this every webinar. We wish we had more time. The good news is there will be an upcoming webinar. The bad news is unfortunately we'll have to wind this one down. So can we ask for parting thoughts from Dr. Sandra, Rosanna, and even Professor Slade? We'll start with you, Dr. Sandra.
Thank you, and I appreciate the discussion, and then I have also taken away a lot of good tips from you, and I like your concluding remark about the ceiling and the floor. These are very important. Boundaries, communication, relationship, faith, prayer, hug, all these are important takeaways. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sandra. Rosanna, any parting thoughts?
Yes, if I can share this one last slide, and that is that the best defense is a good offense. So go out there and serve the community together. It doesn't matter if your child is 2, they can give hugs. And so we serve together as a family band, and our kids, play on worship bands at church. And even Caleb is using his job as a game engineer to help teens that are depressed about themselves. So even things that we perceive as a bad thing, when we have a mission, a sense of meaning about what we do, we can turn into a good thing. And, we teach English together in China. And for us, it's very easy to teach, the days of the week. But for us to have to serve together is the best form of defense at all, because it is a good offense. So I'll leave with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosanna. And that spoke to me personally because I love sports, defense, offense. Those are my languages. Any parting thoughts from you, Professor Slade?
Well, yes, I just want to say thank you to our great speakers, our moderator, our tech team, and thanks to every single person that took time to join this global webinar. We had people from over 50 countries around the world, got a lot of people live streaming the event also, so thank you. But let me encourage everybody. If you're a native Chinese speaker, go to the Family First Global WeChat and register right now, because every single day there's original content about this very subject: how to be a better mom, how to be a better dad, how to help your children to be more resilient. It's really good stuff, and our team in China does a fabulous job. Remember, I was raised in large part by Chinese families, so we love our Chinese brothers and sisters. If you're an English speaker, or you're from Indonesia or Pakistan or Japan, check out the Family First Global Facebook there. Check out Family First Global Facebook itself. There's daily original content in your language. And by the way, if you're from a nation that doesn't yet have a Family First Global, send us an email, all right? Because we want to really get the good news out to everyone, every nation, that you can have a good marriage. You can have strong, resilient children. Not everybody's going to graduate from Harvard, but that's okay, because that's not the goal. The goal is to have children who are happy, who are well-adjusted, who themselves can have happy and successful marriages with good children themselves. And that is possible for every single family. We want to help you. We are a service organization, and we serve all families. Doesn't matter your religious background or your nationality or anything like that. We are Christians, yes, but we do it because we believe God wants every family to be happy, to be united, and to be successful. So thank you so very much. And we hope to see you in July for our next global webinar, which is going to be for fathers and helping raise resilient kids.
Thank you, Professor Slayton. Amazing reminders, principles, and encouragement to all those that are watching in even those foreign languages. So we want to wind down and thank Dr. Sandra Tsang. Thank you for your time. It's been amazing. And Rosanna, Lynn, and Caleb, who had to go off to a dinner already, speaking of family and the dynamics, right? So thank you for joining us in this amazing webinar. Babe, what's up next?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say Pastor Slayton, he could be a pastor, Professor Slayton was saying that there's something to look forward to. And I think that just being at this event makes us realize there's still so much to talk about. And so we want to announce that the next webinar is going to be on July 23, and it's going to be like a part 2. It's going to be raising a resilient generation in a fragile world, but with the dads. So from a dad's perspective. And so all the participants will receive an invite from FFG. So please save the date. And I'm so excited about this as well, because we do want to hear from the fathers and their role in really helping children to succeed.
Yeah, and I think that is a big battle today, really getting the dads in the forefront. So please join us for that. Even if you're not a dad, it'll give you perspective on how they should be handling resilience and working with the kids. And maybe that could be your role in encouraging your husbands as well. So thanks, everybody. We want to have a final poll with all of you. And if you heard the announcement earlier, there is a door prize for all of you that stayed on. If you have a Family First Global national chapter in your country, then you will get, or 10 of you will get a prize from your region. So please answer this poll as we wind down. We'd love to get your feedback, because feedback fuels this event and the team forward. How would you rate the webinar? Please put that in there. Be as honest as possible. You know, these are anonymous polls. How likely are you to join the next webinar? And finally, what topics are you interested in, so that Family First, the webinar team, etc., can continue to address that moving forward. So thank you for answering those polls as you wind down with us. We want to invite now Professor Slayton and all the speakers back onto the camera as we wave goodbye to all of our participants. And thank you sincerely once again, Dr. Sandra Tsang, Rosanna Lin, Professor Slayton. Thank you for joining us on this call. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. Goodbye. Hope to see you in the next webinar. And wherever this might find you, God bless. Take care. Let's build resilient children in this fragile world. Bye-bye, everybody.